So what I call this is the creating the most effective learning environment, guaranteed. Yeah? And I'm getting a reverb here, so just 1 second, let me fix that. Okay, that should do it. This model of learning, or creating a learning environment, has a different focus because it accelerates learning from a different place. And I'm going to share that different focus with you in our session today, and then open it up to questions or, again, shared experiences of those of you that have gone through this kind of learning environment in one of my training programs, perhaps, Coach for Life. I'm also going to give you some research results. There's not been a lot of research on this. It's not been funded by anybody. But I've done some of my own research in what's the impact of holding a kind of space that we're going to be talking about here. Where in the traditional learning environment that I grew up in, grade school, high school, university, corporate training, and adult learning, it's mostly been critique-based learning. In other words, if I'm learning a topic, like I was trying to learn Japanese back a number of years ago. I laugh at that because that is not one of my natural gifts and talents. But anyhow, I was learning Japanese before going over to Japan, living there for 4 years. The trainers, like most trainers, corrected me when I pronounced it wrong or I said the wrong thing. So it's the educator, the facilitator of learning is what I call all teachers, whether you're an informal educator, as a parent would be, or a grandparent, or a formal trainer, is mostly pointing out what's wrong. No, it's not desu ka, it's whatever it was, right? The inspired learning model is a positive acknowledgement-based learning model. In other words, the student will be still going through things, they'll still be making, quote, mistakes, but the facilitator of learning is going to be listening for and acknowledging those things that were correct, that were according to the competencies of that topic, that subject matter, whatever that might be. So it's really at a 180. It's reinforcing the student for what they got right, as opposed to what they didn't get right. Okay? So I'm going to show you some research results that indicate what's the benefit. Can people even learn that way? The answer is a resounding hallelujah, yes. And it's much more natural learning. So I want my learners, regardless of who they are, formal or informal, to take personal responsibility for their own learning. I am not responsible for what a learner learns. Can't. It's up to the learner to absorb, want to absorb, study, not study. I can force them, I can give them promises of reward of some form or measure. But ultimately, the bottom line is that the learner is responsible for their own learning. Number 2 is to follow their passions and curiosities. I'm a huge advocate of an individual learning what they're curious about. It's not unlike Montessori or my understanding of Montessori system of having stimulation around the student and having them gravitate towards the dinosaur, or have them gravitate towards a storybook, or have them gravitate towards working with blocks. In other words, what are they curious about that they're ready to learn now, or learn more about now? Same thing for adults, by the way. All right. So I've never gone back and tried to learn Japanese again. That's not, oh Lord, or another foreign language for that matter. It's not that's not where my passions go. My passions go towards woodworking. It goes through learning more about nature. It learns more about learning about trees. It learns my curiosities about. Recently, I probably spent 6 hours on how do you take a sandy soil and make it more rich and alive so that can grow something. So that's what I was curious about. Be excited. Experience the love of learning along the journey. There is an excitement that, again, I did not experience in my childhood. I thought a horrible learner. School was not my friend. And now in later life, I can't stop learning. I'm compelled to learn about things that are around me. Be excited to see you again as the educator, as the parent, as a grandma, as the corporate trainer, instead of avoiding you. Not coming back to class is a good indicator of that one. Be more present and fully engaged as a human being and as a learner. These are all the things that I'm looking for from a learner. Be excited about exploring new possibilities. Okay, that's the promise, but also the expectation of the learner in an inspired learning space. If you don't want to be here, leave. go someplace else. I know this is opposite of my corporate training. You will be there, you will learn, you will pass the test, and you will be certified, and you'll get a check mark, right? You've gone to whatever class is mandatory. You will go to third grade, you will go to high school, you will, I get it. That's all traditional. And a lot of that learning is wasted time. Because a student is physically there, maybe, but certainly not mentally, not emotionally, not engaged in the learning process. The facilitator of learning, whether you call them a second grade teacher or a high school teacher or a professor or a corporate trainer or a learning and development professional, here are the things that are available to you within the Inspired Learning model. Be exhilarated after every learning session. Be exhilarated. Remember that feeling of engagement with students, the energy of the room, the excitement of the aha moments that you see on a student's face? Yeah, that's what this one's about. Have each learner take greater responsibility and hold them to that. Have them do the work. Have them do the work. Anyone that's gone through my coach training has heard that 1,000 times, but it's worth repeating. Have the student do the work. Feel passionate about supporting your learner's discovery journey. The passion of facilitating learning is, for those of us that are attracted and drawn to that, that's our work to do on a planet. Wow. I heard a statistic one time in education here in the United States that young teachers that went into the profession after university training, half of them had left the profession within 5 years. Half had left what they had been dreaming about being an educator, a teacher, working with kids, working with, again, whatever age level they were moving towards. And more than half of them had left the profession because they were burned out. And I believe, and I don't have any statistics to back this up, but my personal belief is that they were going into a system that was demoralizing for them. You have to teach this, you have to teach it this way, and if you don't, you're going to get fired. Half of them left. It breaks my heart. Next point, be excited to track your learner's progress and be open to your learner's appreciation. A student that loves their teacher has a special bond. And we can all think of one right now in a moment of someone in your life that you've had as an educator that touched your life. They showed that they cared about you and you loved them for that. Mrs. Alley was that for me. Sixth grade school teacher, I've been struggling to read. I've been struggling to learn. I've been struggling to do all kinds of things for, at that level, 6 years already, at the ripe old age of what, 11, 12. And Mrs. Alley just kind of took me under her wing, and she gave me projects that I loved. I did a project on Honduras, of all things, right? I don't know how I picked Honduras. Maybe we were looking at South America or looking at countries. I don't know. Central America. And thank you, Mrs. Alley. Yeah, she was one of the first, and I had several others after that. But you receive that appreciation from that child's look, from that appreciation that they have for you, and be really open to receive that. So, what are facilitators of learning focused on currently in a critique-based society? What the student got wrong. No, you didn't get that right. 2 and 2 does not equal 5. Okay, so it's circled in red. It's got -1 on the top of the worksheet. And the other opportunity for a facilitator of learning is to focus on what the student got right, which is the journey that I'm going to support you to really look at seriously as a educator, as a trainer, as a facilitator of learning. There was a study that was done. I think this was documented in one of the Clifton Strengths books. International survey asked parents from 6 different countries, if your child shows up with the following school grades at the end of the term, or the end of the year, or the end of the whatever: English A, Social Studies A, Biology C, and Algebra F. Got it? Okay. Which grade deserves the most attention from you as the parent? You as the educator. But this was specifically targeted towards parents. Okay? So again, your child comes home with a report card, A, C, F. Which one demands the most attention? Most attention from you. Here's the juxtaposition. The dark blue, I'm going to read it just out loud because you can't see it real. The country, obviously, UK, Japan, China, USA, France, and Canada. The second column is, the parent says the most attention should be focused on the A. The next column here is focused on the F. And then the F, greater focus by what percentage over the focus on the A. Okay, so just a simple arithmetic. So I'll go down here. The USA is where I am. We're kind of in the middle of the pack here. 7% of the parents said focus on the A. 77% of the parents said focus on the F, which is a 1,000% more focus on what's going wrong on this report card. My child is getting an F in this subject matter. We obviously need to work on that. So let's focus all their attention, all of my attention on let's get that F corrected. And we're not even the worst. I mean, this is, who is this? Canada's was 1,283% more focus on the F. France was, again, higher than that. The UK, surprisingly, was like 136%. Hip hip hooray, you guys in UK. Well done. You're way ahead of the rest of the world. So, there's also a source in How Full Is Your Bucket? How Full Is Your Bucket? And it was written by, or a reference in there from Elizabeth Hurlock that did a study in 1925 here in the U.S. And she looked at students and supported the student through a control group, good researcher, just plain ignored them, didn't give them any kind of a feedback. The red line is a critiqued, criticized them for, again, what they got wrong. Or, in the fourth group, praised them, praised the group of students. And she was teaching mathematics in, I believe, grade school. And so she looked at this in terms of problems being solved, and they all started off at the same place before going through the differentiation of feedback. And the significant part here, obviously, is those that were either critiqued or the control group were at 5% or minus 5%, right? They were lost. It's like got no feedback. So obviously that didn't work. Those that got critiqued had some growth. They had 19% growth in terms of the number of problems that they were solving. Not bad, 19%, hip hip hooray. And this is in a 5-day period, by the way. All right, so you see it there, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. By the end of day 5, the group that she was criticizing at least got some attention, even if it was negative attention. And there was 19% growth, more learning than took place 5 days ago with the same teacher, same everything. But look at this, 71% growth in terms of the number of problems solved by only praising them. Wow, you got this one right, you got this one right, you got this one right, you got this one right. Now they can figure out which ones they got wrong because they were circled or however the teacher did that. But by and large, the teacher, the educator, said, yeah, good work, 71%. Now, what that translates to is 274% more learning in 5 days. In 5 days, 274% greater learning by praising the student for what they got right, as opposed to critiquing them for what they got wrong. That's been my experience. Students like to show back up. They know that they need to learn more things about whatever the subject matter is. My case has been professional coach training. All right, so yeah, there's a whole bunch of competencies, there's a whole bunch of behaviors, there's a whole bunch of things you need to learn to be a professional coach. And there's some unlearning that takes place as well. But by focusing on what they get right and what they bring into the training, even on day 1, that you're doing spectacularly well on this and this and this and this, that's exactly what we're wanting from a professional coach. Do they know that there's more to learn? Are they stumbling on some things, some old habits? Yes and yes. But they're jazzed about, okay, I'm getting it. Right, I'm doing it. I can see the light. Yeah, stunning, absolutely stunning. Now, I had the privilege of doing a summer institute at Johns Hopkins University back a number of years ago. Do I have a date on this one? I don't know. This would have been 2004, maybe 2000, probably 2003, 2004. And at that summer institute, one of the students, it was a graduate program for educators that were currently teaching. And so she did a study. She had two groups. I think it was like a freshman group in high school. She had both groups the year before, so she knew the students, and she was a spectacular educator in the first place. And now she's back at Johns Hopkins University Graduate School taking a summer institute on continuing education, basically. So she said, okay, so I'm going to take these two groups of students. I have a new curriculum this semester. Both groups were going downhill. Both classes were going downhill in terms of, again, problem solving. It was a new curriculum that had been mandated by the state of Maryland, I believe it was. So she said, okay, I'm going to try Redding's crazy idea of only acknowledging and give it a shot, give it a try. So I'm going to bring it into my worst class, thank you very much, yeah. Where they were 6 out of the 10 students in this class had been started off passing, doing the work correctly. And by the 4th week, only 2 of them were doing passing work. The other group had 4 people out of the 10 doing passing work. And she started doing, only acknowledging this group. She continued to educate the rest of the group in her brilliance as an educator, as she'd been trained earlier. With the I'm going to call it the higher group, the blue line group here, right there. Week goes by, no improvement at all on either group. In fact, one group went down. At the beginning of the 6th week, she started seeing some light started getting shined on the students. They started picking up, both groups. But look at the trajectory of the traditional learning, which she was giving both critique and accolades, right? And by the end of the semester, 9 weeks, 6 out of the 10 in the traditional learning group was at a passing level. So she went from 4 to 6 passing, okay, which is a 50% increase. Spectacular. Well done. Yay, educator. But look what happened with the group that only got positive feedback. 9 out of 10. And this is, again, at the low ebb of, the lowest group that was struggling the most. Now 9 out of the 10 were passing by the end of that semester for a brand new curriculum. Measurable, tangible, hardcore. It was mathematics. It was either you're right or wrong, basically. So it wasn't a bias of the teacher or the model. But it proved, let me show you the statistics on this one. You had a 50% increase going from week 4 people to 6 people, which is a 50% increase that I referred to. The group that was the worst of the group, struggling the most, goes from 2 students up to 9 students, 350% increase of learning in a matter of a few weeks. This is like 5 weeks, people. It's so powerful, it can't help but work. It's so powerful because it is a natural way that we want to learn. We are curious beings. I had a question, I missed it, so I'll come back to that in a second. And we'll open this up to questions here in about 10 minutes. So, traditional learning method, 50%, and a great educator too, by the way. Met her and was working with her over the course of this summer institute for probably, I think 4 or 5 weeks it was. Inspired learning, with just changing her methodology to focus on what the student got right, 350%. Wow. Yeah, with inspired learning. Now, here's an example. I'm not going to go through this exercise with those of you that are here, but I want to introduce you to this exercise so that you can do it A, on your own, or B, with a group or with a class or with your friends or with your relatives or your siblings, I don't care, your neighborhood. Because I needed a method that kind of demonstrated what I'm talking about in tangible terms to people in a short, instead of a week or 5 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever. So I developed this program, this exercise, and I call it the 4.5 minute exercise. 4.5 minutes, okay? So keep that in mind. So here's the instructions. We have a listening partner and we have a sharing partner. A listening partner and a sharing partner. So what I'm listening for is what has already been learned, what the learner's natural strengths and gifts and talents were in what they share with me, the learner's curiosities and life-affirming attitudes that they have towards what they share with me. And again, I don't even know what they're going to share with me yet. I just know that it's going to be something that they're excited about learning more about. That's all. This is going to be 100% confidential. It's 100% active listening and engaged connection with the person that's sharing. As the listener, I am going to give no advice and no judgment. Zero advice. Oh, I do that too. Have you ever tried to do this? Yeah, just zip it. All right? You're not talking. You're listening. 100% listening. And no joining in with your story or common interest. Oh, fantastic. And what kind of exotic hardwoods do you use if they start talking about using exotic hardwoods? Okay, so that's my job as a listener. The job of the person that's going to be sharing is going to share about a lifelong passion. It could be related to work, family, hobby, doesn't matter. You are always learning more about this topic. When you're engaged with this topic, time tends to fly, right? You're going to take 3 minutes to share, and I'll time it. I'll let you know when to stop, okay? And be 100% authentic, be real. That's to the person that's going to be sharing. So they go, yep, okay, got it, Peter. Thank you very much. Now, after the 3 minutes, we have 90 seconds where the person that's been listening will acknowledge the person that was sharing about whatever their passion was, and acknowledge them for the passion that they showed about it. This is all real. This is not made up. It's actually what the person experienced as a listener. They're going to acknowledge them for the strengths that they bring to this particular activity or learning venture. What kind of knowledge they have about this topic, and the kind of commitment that they have demonstrated in sharing this with the listener. The partner who was sharing opens up to receive those acknowledgments, and they can't, the person, in other words, that was sharing about their passion can't say, yeah, no, yeah, but you don't understand. It just your only job here is to say thank you. Let it sink in, right? Let it land. Just absorb that acknowledgement from this wonderful listener for the last 3 minutes, okay? So we've had 3 minutes of sharing. We've had a minute and a half of acknowledging, and that's it. That's the end of the exercise. Now, if you want to flip it and have it reversed, do that, which I always do in an audience. So in 4.5 minutes, and at the end of the 4.5 minutes, here's what I have the person that was sharing fill out. Little form, little card I print up ahead of time. So if I have an audience of 50 people, then I'll have 50 little slips ahead of time, like an index card. And I have them answer the yellow box first. So after sharing and receiving 100% positive feedback, because that's all they're allowed to get, no critique. Oh, you really screwed up on that one. I got a better method. No, none of that. Just leave that out. On a scale of 1 to 10, what's the level of excitement that you have now for this subject matter that you just shared with your listening partner? 1 to 10. Typically, they're 7, 8, 9, 10. Self-appreciation goes way up. It's like, that's a 9. I haven't really talked about this out loud to anybody. Stimulated with new ideas. Again, typically very high marks. Inspired to pursue even more learning around this particular topic. Yep, typically very high. And clarity, maybe even for the next steps of your own learning. Okay, so just 5 questions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maximum of 10. So the total here is going to be probably close to 50. All right. Now, after they've done this box, then I have them answer the exact same questions. Prior to doing this 4.5 minute exercise, where would you have put yourself on exactly the same questions, exactly the same scale, 1 to 10? And I've done this now, I don't know, I've probably done this with 25 or 50 different groups. But and then finally, the calculation down here, what's the percentage of increase of what I call readiness to learn? And here's what some of those results look like. 34.6% increase, or almost 35% increase in overall learning readiness in 4.5 minutes. Now, what group did I use this on in this particular graph? It was a group of, let's see if I have the number, I think it was like 46 educational leaders from Kerala. It's south in India. And they were all educators, grade school and high school educators. The blue scale here is the prior, like 4.5 minutes ago, basically. Collectively, cumulatively, they're all at, I'd say 6, an average of 6 across all those 5 questions. 4.5 minutes later, after sharing about it and it being only acknowledged for my strengths, my passions, my commitment, my knowledge, the things that were picked up in 3 minutes, worth, and in a minute and a half of acknowledgement, the average goes up to about 8. So it goes from, there's a 7.7, 7.9, 8, 8.1, 8.4. 35% increase in 4.5 minutes. Readiness to learn. Can you imagine a class that you're teaching right now that may be going over the course of 12 weeks or 6 months or 4 workshops of an hour each where the students could go with only acknowledging and, oh my God, this is brilliant. This is fantastic. This is bang on. This is exactly what we're looking for in this competency, in this behavior in my case, as a professional coach that I teach, okay? But it could be electronics, it could be manufacturing, it could be finance, it could be basket weaving, it could be needlepoint, it could be whatever that subject matter is, and you're facilitating it. Encourage, acknowledge, and point out what they got right, because that part then gets reinforced more quickly for the learner, and they have more excitement to get back into the stuff that they know that they need to do better or they need to learn more about. It's like billows. It's like, when you're it looks like an accordion that blows air into a fire. The little embers are there in every single learner, and you're like the billows that, wow, you're doing great. This is fantastic. And it's not just saying fantastic that's for the sake of saying fantastic. It's actually pointing out exactly the competency that they did. When you did this in your needlepoint, that is exactly that's that stitch that we've been trying to have you learn. Brilliantly done. So it's very specific, and it ties it back to a specific competency within that subject matter. Oh, that's not so hard. I can do that, is what goes on. And I hear that often, by the way, in training. Or they notice it in somebody else, and I acknowledge them, which I have them do. Acknowledge that student for what you hear that is brilliant according to these competencies. And when they can acknowledge it and see it in somebody else, they say, oh, I could do that. I thought that was more complicated than that. No, not. Just whoop. So you get the cross-fertilization. This was the high-tech managers. This happened to be in Delhi, India. This was back in, I think, again, about the same, 2013. It says 2013. And this is a group of 47. Same thing. Had them do the exercise back and forth. They filled out the forms, and there was a 30% overall increase in. I must have. I trimmed it down to 4 minutes. I must have been pressed for time. So they shared for 2.5 minutes. They acknowledged for a minute and a half, and 30% increase. Again, it's never not been that way. It's never not been that way. Senior executive coaches, I did it with another group for the full 4.5 minutes, 46.5% increase in 4.5 minutes. That's, what can I say? Long-time passion, what's this? Oh, this is the educational leaders again. 39.6, almost 40% here again in 4.5 minutes. Bottom line, the inspired learning model brings the innate love of learning back to the learner. Learning is exciting. Learning is adventuresome. Learning is exhilarating. every human being, you cannot stop a human being from learning. You can slow them down, you can retard it, you can block it, you can get in the way of it, you can critique it, and people will still learn, thank God. But remove that critique, remove that criticism, and it will flourish. Guarantee you, it will flourish. Innate love of learning comes back to the learner. It also brings the innate joy of celebration back to those who facilitate learning. I believe that this is the antidote for burnout for teachers. It's the antidote for burnout. Burnout meaning I am exhausted, I do my best, I give everything that I can give, and they're still not learning. And I have to use, this may not be the whole answer to our educational system in the world right now, but it's a huge one. It's absolutely a huge one. There's 7 elements that we're going to be talking about over the course of the next 10 weeks, well, next 9 weeks now. We're going to be talking about the facilitator. We're going to talk about the subject matter. We're going to talk about the physical environment or the virtual environment, as the case may be. The space. What kind of space are we creating in our learning environment as a group? The inspired learner themselves is at the center of this model intentionally. The standards of presence, which is a guidelines, it's kind of like classroom guidelines. How are we going to show up? How are we going to be with each other? How are we going to listen? How are we going to share? How are we going to absorb? How are we going to acknowledge? All that is in the standards of presence. The integration process afterwards. How do we integrate what I now know to what I can do? So integration is a huge part of learning, is like putting my learning to work, putting my new knowledge to work, putting my new skill set to work. The whole integration process. And then finally, not the inspiration, but inspiration is like the magic that comes out of this and opening up to that. Where both the student is inspired by this process and in the space, as well as the facilitator. I am inspired. It's like a Mobius, that lazy infinity sign that I've talked about, I think, in previous. It's like an infinity sign that has been twisted, one side of it 180, reconnected, so the inner becomes the outer becomes the inner, the Mobius. I am too inspired by my students, by my learners. So that's the journey for the next 9 weeks after this. And more time for Q&A, more time for how does it apply to me as a corporate trainer? How does it apply to me as a high school educator that has a curriculum that is mandated by the state or the country or the school system? And it's been used on all of those, all of the above. Yeah. And here's some resources. I'll just leave this up for a minute so you can, there's some URL links there. There's a learning manual that we wrote back in 2003, I believe. And you can get that on the Coach for Life website. I think it's like $99, 80 pages. We'll talk more in detail than what I'm able to do in this kind of a format. If you're at all interested in educating, learning how to learn, learning how to create a learning environment, you'll get a ton of benefit out of that. Positively Brilliant Self-Mastery is a book I wrote. That's another one in terms of this whole idea of a positive approach to life, your life in particular, individually, but also holding a space for others. That's on Amazon Kindle, I believe, still available. A book that I read many years ago, How Full Is Your Bucket, is one of the references that I used earlier. Love that book. And another one that I haven't talked about at all in this series is The Carrot Principle, which is an old book. Gostick and Elton wrote that. The Carrot Principle. And it's a book that talks about, again, doing basically one thing: acknowledging people for doing a good work. That's it. That's it. And of course, it's like in 4 quartiles, right? The lowest, the middle low, the middle high, and the high. In terms of basically answering one question. How often does your boss acknowledge you for the good work that you've done? And the ones in the lowest quadrant, of course, say, "What is that? I've never experienced that. What are you talking about?" The highest one says, "Yeah, pretty much. Every week I'm acknowledged for something that I've done, and I'm shown appreciation by my workers or by my supervisor or what have you." And then what they did was very interesting. For those of us that are statistically adept, they took the industry and the company's financials, whether it was a hotel or a manufacturing plant or a service provider or a financial service provider, and they took that industry's statistics and said, for the companies that were in the upper quartile of that particular industry in terms of this little study, what were the return on investment numbers? What were the profit margins? What was the employee turnover? And all those kinds of statistics that we love in corporations. And oh, what a surprise, the people that got acknowledged the most had more loyal employees. They had better profit margins, gross margins. They had more profitability that went to the bottom line, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just a brilliant piece of work, the carrot principle. If you don't buy anything else, get that one. So with that, I'm going to come back to my